Good morning on the West Coast, good noon on the East Coast, and happy days everywhere in between. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, and as I always say, it's a beautiful day to have a webinar. I'm John Yarrington, CEO of the Performance Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and performance-driven marketing industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI family, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to yet another fun-filled but exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. Today we're joined by a trio of talented industry leaders, including Rebecca Barr from RLB Consulting, Doug Bognar from Apex Media, and Carey Chase from Modus Direct. And together we'll be looking at the lessons learned from what just passed, the busiest and most expensive political advertising season on record. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use the questions tab located in your control panel. Also, please note, you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but please hold all of we'll hold all the replies to the end of today's discussion. Alrighty, folks. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. Unlike Cher, he actually can turn back time. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is Vice President of New Business and Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency located in Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at UCSD Extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI's Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much. And for the 103rd time, because today is the 103rd episode, take it away, my friend. Take it away.
Outstanding, John. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, and welcome in everybody. Very excited to get started on this topic, and believe it or not, November 20th, which means that Thanksgiving's right around the corner, but also we don't have to see any more ads, we don't have to read any more articles, we don't have to watch any more roundtable analyses, we don't have to listen to any more commercials about the election. What we thought would never end has ended, and it's time to look back and assess the advertising results from what seemed like, to everyone, an endless years-long election campaign. So how much spend happened? Where did it go? What kind of impact did the media have on the entire landscape? We're going to kind of take a step back, and we won't call it a post-media election hangover. We will call it a assessment and an audit to kind of see how it actually all shaped out after all the prognostication ahead of time. And Carey, we're going to start with you.
All right.
I remember months leading up to this. We've had a kind of the pre-election, the Olympics and election, and you had been advising clients for months about planning for the lack of inventory, especially in those battleground states where the spending was just off the hook. So what kind of conversations did you have leading up to the election? And now what kind of conversations are you having now with your clients?
So thank you, Chris, and it's great to be here for 104. We had been talking to our clients since the beginning of the year, primarily on the political landscape. And it evolved, as really there wasn't much of a primary, and sometimes that can impact second and third quarter, and we sailed through that. We did book early, and the clients were kind of got in line and gave us budgets, and that really benefited. We went through, and actually I would say that we felt that the Olympics actually, and we talked a bit about this, had a little bit more of an impact. We saw results impacted on especially the NBC affiliates, more so than I normally do because it was a very successful Olympics. But getting into the political landscape, we were girded, especially we had a lot of campaigns in Michigan, and then some impacts that were on the side of Pennsylvania. $10 billion was spent overall in the marketplace across all things national, from everything from presidential down to county, dog collectors. So what we found is that we did really well. We cleared. We were not running around. My hair is not on fire trying to make up budget. We do a lot of Medicare Advantage type, so it aligns right with, it starts on 10/1 and it's right there with the election. And it was we were meeting budgets. We did have to pay. I was looking through some of the schedules, on some of those affiliates, 2, 3, in some places 6 times more than what we would normally pay for about 3 weeks. But we had good communication with clients, and they really understood it. And that's really, I think, what has evolved over time, is really preparing them for it. And then booking early, which I think really worked out well, because I have some opinions as far as, I think this election was very targeted, and it was a different target than what we've seen before. I think that it's much more digitally focused, and even the television, the CTV, really saw the difference between 2020 and 2024, and maybe we saw a little bit in 2022, but they were going after young males in particular, and that's different from the older demographic, things that compete with Medicare, the news. So I think that we found some areas that when we were doing our broad rotations, which is normally what we recommend, we didn't see as much pullback outside of the news, where we did have to pay those higher rates. So what we're having conversation-wise, to get to the end of the question, is now we're able to really, because we're not in a hole, we're really able to be strategic with our money, because now we can pull back, and now we can really focus on the stations. We're not sitting there trying to make sure that we get across the finish line, both budget and efficiency-wise. So, long answer.
That's a fantastic answer. It's the length was well deserved. It's interesting that you had mentioned, months ago when we first chatted about preparation, about booking early, and the need to do that. It sounds like your team was really successful in communicating with your clients. So hats off to you guys at Modus for making that happen. So Doug, Carey mentioned the $10 billion, and then one study that also talked about it was that across all campaigns, it was up over $1 billion just from 4 years ago. So not only is it a staggering number in the spend, it's a staggering number in growth. Do you think we've reached the ceiling of this kind of spend?
Sadly, no. I mean, we all got sick of it pretty quickly. I kid you not. In deep red Indiana, I saw ad campaigns for school board for some of our collar counties. School board? Really? Okay. So that just means everyone's spending. Carey, I thought, nailed it, by the way, on her experience and the preparation that they took as an agency to accommodate their clients. So again, and great job there too. We tried to do the same thing. I think we've entered the era of the nonstop campaign cycle.
That's interesting.
There is, let's face it, right now we have an incoming president who's a lame duck. We can talk about 2 years from now, but this particular president likes to see himself on TV, likes to have rallies and things. I don't think it's going to stop. I think it's going to continue, and there are going to be people jockeying. There are people jockeying right now on both sides to succeed him. So I just think it's a whole new era in terms of that spend, and I don't see it being a ceiling. Carey's right, though. I think we'll see a shift. That shift will continue. It's going to follow eyeballs to CTV. But yeah, there seems to be more and more money pouring into this space at all levels, including down ballot.
Interesting, right? And so at some point, you wonder if it's just this bottomless pit because there are new channels that are always evolving. So with that, the shift towards digital, more CTV spend, Rebecca, I'll ask you, what was the biggest surprise to you this election cycle when it came to spending and the chosen media channels?
Yeah, I would say it's not a surprise that the spend moved towards digital and CTV. The surprise to me was the amount of it. It was like, I think I saw one statistic that said CTV was up over 500% versus previous election cycles. So, and again, Carey totally nailed it with her first answer, but we really saw that big shift there. And I think what we also saw was it left the linear side comparatively soft, when you're looking at other election cycles. It's not like it was totally soft, but other election cycles we've seen, and as this coincides with AEP, sometimes direct response advertisers, if they want to clear it all, they have to put in a guaranteed buy, or and things like that. And it's difficult for direct response advertisers because it limits the amount you can kind of optimize. But this year it was a lot more buyer friendly than we've seen, and I think most of my career. I mean, it's been super competitive, and the news was competitive as it should be. That's exactly where the eyeballs are. But even that was not as rigid as I've seen it in the past. I think some of that might have been due to some advertisers were worried about brand safety, and they avoided the news. So I think that opened it up to other advertisers that maybe were a little bit less sensitive to it. And I think there was a lot of gains that were made there.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful, Rebecca, to talk about brands being sensitive to news, because I think that, and this is not a political discussion, but it's clear that certain news networks have certain biases. And so the question is, as a brand, you are aware of that and try to figure out how you lean in or not lean in to some of those networks. I think that's fascinating. The other thing that I thought was very interesting was, in terms of new channels, a shift towards podcasting. So we both saw that both candidates were on Joe Rogan and Alex Cooper. Both of those podcasters have tens of millions of followers and are very influential with their constituents. As the media landscape becomes even more fragmented, and the advent of CTV allows for better targeting, is this a trend that you think is going to continue, where spend then goes into all of these various new channels that are emerging? And I'll open it up to all of you.
I'll jump in. Yeah. Go ahead,
Carey. Go ahead, Carey. Ladies first.
Okay. All right. So, yes. I mean, so as performance marketers, I think we're always the canaries that want to see, because if you have new, and I wouldn't call podcasting new, but it's definitely, I think it highlighted just almost the way that television, people are going to be listening. It seems much more, because the episodes are for a week, you get that larger audience, and so you get that impact that you kind of had 15 years ago on linear television. So we have definitely worked within the podcast world. It's been a little bit of a challenge to make it work with either unit lengths. You don't have visuals. Sometimes you have the visuals, but then you also have if somebody can do a testimonial, that can really, so it's just kind of finding the right balance between the product and the podcast itself. But definitely, and we're all in for whatever we can find as far as new channels, always in for our work.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't. My answer is I don't know how influential the podcasts were. Some people say Harris lost because she didn't do Joe Rogan, and Trump won because he did. I seem to think like it's more preaching to the choir. How many minds are going to get changed when you're trying to call an audience like that? I need to see the data on it. I wish it was more direct response related, or we had a true one-to-one association. But I'm skeptical of that, to be honest. I do want to say, Carey hit it too, that being flexible as direct response or direct-to-consumer marketers and agencies, that was super key in what we do. And while that hurts the CPM space and brand advertisers, we have some brand advertisers that were off the air on the broadcast week of 10/28. Nothing, zero. And that just gave great opportunity to our DR advertisers, and we took advantage. Sure. So I kind of liken it to, this event drove so much viewership, really super high viewership, and to a lot of heritage space, frankly, that we haven't seen in a long time. It's like being, I used to buy New Year's Eve, overnights like crazy, because rates were discounted, and people who never stay up that late are up that late watching TV, and they get bored with Ryan Seacrest, and they start spinning through the channels, and we catch them with something. I think that's kind of how this election was.
Interesting.
I just want to add. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Jump in,
I was just
Rebecca.
going to dovetail a little bit of what Doug and Carey both said in terms of the podcasts. I think that the candidates really gravitated toward that because it is a longer form engagement with their base than they get even on linear TV. But to what Doug said is it's not a way to get to the undecided voters. I mean, it's still people standing in their own echo chamber. They're going to go to the podcast that they listen to because their values and beliefs are aligned with the host or the content. So I think it is going to continue to grow, but I think it will be interesting to see what the strategy is to go after the undecideds.
Yeah, and so Rebecca, I want to stay with you on that because you were talking about the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of these types of a podcast channel, for example. Looking back now, what did you think was the most effective spend in terms of either the channel, its delivery, its length, its format?
In terms of the election or in terms of non-election advertisers?
I would say maybe a little bit of both, because you had an opportunity for the non-election advertisers to kind of sneak into some of these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think really news across the board on different media was really the winner. I would say certainly on linear TV it was. I mean, that's where the most engaged eyeballs were. But then, really connected TV was a big winner, regardless of the content, just getting to, to where each of those target bases were.
No, that makes sense. I guess one question that I want to touch on, because Doug, you had mentioned that it might be a never-ending election cycle. I know this sounds crazy and people are rolling their eyes and gnashing their teeth about it, but there's actually another election in 2 years.
Right.
So
yeah.
I guess, Doug, I can start with you because you had warned us about this, a handful of minutes ago. National trends of high spend, multi-channel, podcast centric. Is this going to continue? Are we going to see this again 2 years from now?
Yes, I don't see why it would change. I don't see why it wouldn't get worse, and it wouldn't attract even more money. This, as of 2 days ago, the winner has not breached 50% of the vote. Think about that. So there's still a division, and there's still just a little subset of voters that need to be persuaded. But it's amazing to me that it's that tight. It's still that tight, and everyone's going to go to their corner, but definitely come out fighting.
Right.
And that's kind of one thing I'd like to bring up too is there's definitely a hangover. We have ComScore. I look at ComScore numbers, and MSNBC's numbers are way down. Anything associated with the losing side of this election in terms of viewership, nobody's watching. I don't want to know, I don't want to hear, I don't want to see. That's going on right now. It'll come back, but I wonder how long this hangover continues.
That's really interesting, because you wonder then from news cycles across various channels, right? So you've got the linear news, but you have so much online news. I'm wondering if the spend is and the viewership on those other channels is down as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. I suspect it is.
Yeah, I have a feeling that it's going to be similar to what we all, it was so aligned with the pandemic, but the new administration, I even was having this conversation with a friend last night that they were going to take some time away, and then with some of the people that are being either recommended or appointed or their nominees, it's kind of like I'm being pulled back in because it's interesting, and then it's just going to be this, as you said, Trump loves television, and so it becomes an entertainment format onto itself. So I have a feeling come January, after the inauguration and we find out that it's the largest inauguration ever, off to the races.
Off to the races. That's right.
Yes.
But we have. Speaking of races, we actually did cross the finish line on 20 minutes, and I think we covered a lot of these topics. I guess I'd like to leave it to the audience to see if they have any questions that I haven't asked. John?
Well, first of all, to be expected, what a great conversation by this group. So thank you very much. And yes, we have some good questions from the audience. So let me share them with you. Let's start with a lessons learned question. Considering the enormous amount of money spent amongst a wide array of media outlets this past political season, what do you think was the biggest takeaway or lesson learned by performance marketers from watching this?
I think, again, it's be prepared, but communicate with your clients that things can change on a dime and that you need to be flexible. So it's both, have things set, but also be ready to rearrange the deck chairs at a moment's notice.
Yeah, I think overall, there's still opportunity there. There's good opportunity there because there are audiences that you typically can't access, reasonably so at a reasonable rate, but they're available to you during cycles such as this.
Good feedback. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's move on to a generation question. Were there any generational norms that are normally considered rock solid that were somewhat busted by this season's election advertising? For example, were boomers responding more to podcast ads, or were Gen Zers responding to linear ads?
I personally don't have the answer to that question yet. I think in the coming days, we'll have more and more data available to us that will allow us to dig into that more deeply. It's a great question, by the way, and leads us to really, bigger, broader media consumption trends. But I personally don't know the answer. Maybe Rebecca or Carey do.
I don't know the answer either, but I mean, every day the old people are getting younger and younger. I say that as somebody that's probably one of those people, but it's like, even my parents are not super tech savvy, but like they have a connected TV, they, they'll listen to a podcast, they'll do all these things, and my parents are 78. So it's like, every day we're getting closer and closer where the people that are, they're not digital natives, but digital immigrants, and everybody's more indoctrinated with it. I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah. The only thing I would actually also suggest that they creatively, there were a lot more varied commercial, creative executions for different audiences for those generational conversations. So, and different talking points. So it's just, it doesn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce a TV ad anymore. Everybody can do it really, and they can do it so fast that I think you're going to see that, and that's going to align with the targeting that you're able to do, mostly in CTV, but also, across the board. We're able to do it linear, not to that extent, but still by contextually.
Thanks, team. Good feedback. Appreciate that. This next question you guys kind of somewhat indirectly touched on throughout the conversation, but it's an inventory question. Now that the elections are over, is there pent-up demand by brands or D2C advertisers wanting to buy ad time? And if yes, will such pent-up demand cause upward pressure on ad rates?
I believe that is true. That is accurate. I think there is some pent-up demand. There's some budget that was either reduced or outright held at bay. I think a lot of advertisers, both in the brand and direct-to-consumer space, were keeping their powder dry during basically October. So I think demand is high right now.
We're seeing that too. I always tell clients that week of the election is going to be the best week because it's over on Tuesday, and I think a lot of people kind of hold off until the following week, and so we always see our clearance always skyrocket. But then we always preface it with, and then it will get tough because the retailers have been chomping at the bit, and Christmas is now in November, so there's that.
Yeah. Or October.
Or October,
It was
right.
October.
It starts October, right.
Yeah.
Really gets
I was
going.
happy to see that instead of a political ad, even though
Yeah,
it was
right.
Yes,
October.
I remember, 100%.
All right, and let's end with one fun question. This one's kind of interesting. $10 billion was spent on influencing 350 Americans, which works out to about $28 per person. If the politicians decided to pass an advertising and simply gave each and every American $28 to buy the support, how in the world would you spend your $28 check?
That is an awesome question.
That is a great question.
I think anymore, that's like what, a double supreme taco and maybe a Mexican pizza at Taco Bell. Supersize it. I mean, $28. That's about all that'll do for you anymore.
Yeah.
About 2 beers, I think.
Yeah, 2 good beers.
Wait, you know what? I'm gonna go with you, Rebecca. For $28, I'm gonna get 2 really good pints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Like it. Nice bottle of wine.
I'll
That's
throw
a
my
great
2
question.
cents out. I was thinking I'd get myself a nice old fashioned or a nice cocktail, and I'd toast to the people I voted to.
There you
That's
go.
right.
There you go.
Right on.
All right, I'm going to come back in here, join the family, join the fun, and close things out. Finally, here I come. Phenomenal session, Rebecca, Doug, Carey, Chris. As always, great job today. Thank you so much for the conversation. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to join us for our next episode of the PDMI Take 20, hosted on Wednesday, December 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Just a little note, that will be the last PDMI Take 20 for the year, so don't miss it. If you do miss it, we'll start back up in January and see you then. I'd also like to take a moment to registration for PDMI Spring Conference. The PDMI East, hosted April 7 through 9 in Miami at the Eden Rock Hotel, is now open. Those who register before Thanksgiving will save $100 on their early bird badge based on our early bird badge program on the registration fees. And plus, I want to point out that if you book now, you'll save nearly $300 a night on your hotel room at the Eden Rock by booking to the PDMI group link. To get your attendee badge and your hotel room, please visit thepdmi.com. That's thepdmi.com. Thanks again, everyone. Make it a great day, and we appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.